Okay, so welcome everyone. Tonight I'm going to discuss a little bit some ideas for what to do with Portuguese secondary education. As you probably understood by now, I have some strong interest in the public understanding of science and teaching and education in general. And I've been doing these kinds of things and thinking about them for a number of years. And over time, you look around you see what's going on, you understand how things are, and understand how they could be improved. This is particularly the case with secondary education. So over the years, I've been visiting lots of secondary schools in Portugal, more than 100. So this is a list I compiled just with the schools I visited since 2012. I finished when I got to 105, and I declared success. I wanted to check what the number was. I was pretty sure it was more than 100. And in many cases, I've been to some of these schools 5-10 times due to various different projects. So, usually I go there to give a talk, sometimes to work with some project with students. But I also take time to talk to teachers, to other students, and so on, and try to understand how the school works, how it compares to other schools, and so on. The AstroCamp also, of course, provides a focus point for thinking about this. So up to now, students from 120 schools participated in the camp, 66 from Portuguese schools, 54 from schools in foreign countries. There are schools from which several students participated in the camp over the years. And again, they provide a good sample and a good comparison point, especially between Portugal and what's going on in other countries. So essentially, what I want to do in the next few minutes is to give you some thoughts and some evaluations I came up with over the years about the status of things, specifically in the case of Portugal, which is, of course, the one I know the best. And immediately you find yourself facing several challenges. So there's some things you learn very, very quickly, in particular things that are not working properly and could be working better. And if you think of how this could be improved, you also more or less easily identify bottlenecks. So there's essentially three main points that I have in this slide. So the first one regards curriculum. The subjects and the topics that you're supposed to learn and the level of detail to which they are discussed varies a lot, not only between countries, which to some extent is reasonable, but even within different regions of the same country. So cases like Spain, Germany, for example, a student in Barcelona and a student in Seville will not learn the same things, or not to the same level of detail. There's also differences between public and private schools. These are also very obvious. Nominally, they have the same curriculum, of course, but what they actually learn in the classroom and how they are taught is very, very different. And it's not only not necessarily the case that the difference is the one you think about. In some cases, private schools are better. In some cases, public schools are better. And over the years, especially in the context of AstroCamp, when interviewing students, that is very, very obvious. Now, if you focus on the case of Portugal, I would say that there's two main bottlenecks. So one is on the mathematical side. Portuguese mathematics curriculum is very, very sloppy, I would call it. Things are not well introduced. Sometimes they're not introduced in the proper order. So, for example, you need to use logarithms in physics and chemistry before you learn them in maths. That's not a bright idea. Also, what you learn or don't learn about statistics, for example, is a bottleneck. Integrals typically are not touched upon, and in this day and age, for anyone who wants to go into science or engineering, I don't think that's really justifiable. And so on. We could go on to some more technical and pedagogical aspects of how maths is taught. Then more on the physics side, there is a lot of imbalance, I would say, between the classical physics you learn and the modern physics, in inverted commas, that you learn. And here in Portugal, modern physics more or less ends around 1925. I may come back to that point. So I think the balance here is quite off. There's also a lot of misconceptions. I told you in my classes about the issue of the relation between the expansion of the universe and the Doppler effect. I think that's just a missed opportunity, but we could think of other examples. Then there's the issue of facilities. Different schools have very different facilities, and it's striking to me. I found several examples in Portugal of two schools in the same town and literally back to back with each other. Like the wall, or a wall separates two schools. They are in the same street or in the adjacent streets, and they have completely different facilities in terms of classrooms, in terms of physics and chemistry labs, and so on. I could understand differences between a school in the middle of Porto and a school in a small town in the interior of Portugal. The fact that this happens next door is a little bit puzzling to me. Then I have to say, teachers are a bottleneck. Some very good friends of mine are teachers. My sister is a teacher. But again, there's a wide variety of technical and pedagogical skills among teachers, specifically physics teachers, which are the ones for which I'm more qualified to talk. There's also a wide range of motivations, and this also plays a role. This is not only the case in Portugal, but it is specifically the case in Portugal. Most physics teachers in Portugal are my age or older. And this is a problem at several levels. One is motivation, but the other one, in my evaluation, is coding skills. There's in Portugal, to progress in your teaching career, you have to take teacher training courses every now and then. I teach some of these occasionally when I have time. And in the few times where with some colleagues we proposed teacher training courses where teachers could learn a little bit about Python or other such high-level interpreted languages, basically no teachers sign up. They sign up to courses like how to use Excel in the classroom and other idiotic courses like that. So this is clearly an issue, and I fear I have to say that the only way this may be solved is we have to wait until these teachers retire and some others come along with a different frame of mind. There's also the teaching to the test approach. Portugal, other countries as well, but Portugal is obsessed with rankings, which are completely silly. Rankings tell you absolutely nothing. And one consequence of that is that what you're really trained for in school is not, you're not trained to learn things, you're trained to do a particular type of exam, which is not even the type of exam you'll find in university. So you're being trained to enter university, but not to do a university degree. And those are two very different things. And there's also a lot of bureaucracy in schools. Teachers typically complain that they have to fill lots of silly pieces of paper and things like that, and they don't have time to prepare classes. So whenever I do these teacher training courses, I have one, for example, on the history of astronomy. I have one on applications of physics to the modern world, things like radioactivity, cancer, global warming, satellites, and so on. Essentially, I would go even so far as to say that the teachers don't really want to learn these things. They want to be given materials, even slides, which they can just copy, paste, and use into their classes. And I think, this is part of the, it's some progress, but it's not really the kinds of thing we need. Okay, having complained enough, how do we fix it? I think there's 5 things that can be done, at least in principle, to fix the system. And we'll discuss in a bit how easy or hard they are. So first, in my evaluation, anyone doing secondary school and wanting to go into science or engineering needs to have a compulsory coding/scientific programming course, at least 3 years of it, right? So starting in what in Portugal we would call 10th grade. You can do this more easily using high-level interpreted languages, Python being maybe the easiest example. Slightly more robust language is MATLAB. Octave is the free version of that. A more modern language, which might be in due course, might be taking the role that Python has now, is Julia. It's relatively more recent. It combines features of Python and various other languages, and I don't know it that well, but from the little I know of it, it's got quite a lot of potential, and so this might be a way to go if we're thinking of training the next generation of people. At the moment, the only thing you have in Portugal in 12th grade is something called computing applications. I've translated the term to English, but so the curriculum for this course was set up more than 15 years ago. It was not very good then, and right now it's just plain stupid. You learn absolutely nothing useful. The only reason you might want to have to take this course in 12th grade is essentially you get an easy grade, and grades count for university access, then this is a good way to get an easy grade without too much work. And I want to emphasize that being able to code efficiently is going to be key to your success in university. Now, I have a lot of experience of supervising undergraduate students and master students in the University of Porto. Typically people doing physics undergraduate degrees, or sometimes physics engineering. And from my experience, the variable that better predicts how well they do in the course, so the final grade they have in physics course, is not the grade with which they start. It's not their entrance grade. The variable which better predicts their success is how well they could code when they started. And the reason for this is obvious if you think about it for 2 minutes. It's a little bit like knowing English, right? Through your university degree, you're going to have to read books, papers, etc. in English. If you're already fluent with English, that's fine, you just read them. If you're not, then you need to learn English first and then be able to read them. So it's as if you have one more subject than your colleagues, because you have to learn English as you go along. It's the exact same thing with coding. At the University of Porto, for example, in the first semester of your first year, you're going to have a coding subject. And if you don't know how to code, you're probably going to spend a lot of time just to pass that course, whereas your colleagues who are already fluent in coding will do it very easily and get very good grades. So here the bottleneck, as I said, is training for the teachers. So we would need people to train, to teach you this coding subject in high school. And I think this is urgent because, again, in my evaluation, a physics teacher who doesn't have at least some basic notions of coding should not be teaching secondary school physics. Again, that's my opinion. I said it in several places. Someone who doesn't know how to code is out of date for teaching physics to a secondary school student. For teaching third cycle, that's fine. It's not really an issue. But for secondary school, times have changed. Okay. Second, what I call a project. Now, one thing I have to say, and this doesn't apply specifically to the students in the room, it applies to everyone in your generation. And it's one of those things that is better seen from a distance. You or your generation right now, the people your age, are far more immature than people the same age as you 10 years ago. The difference is obvious. It's very clear. Probably COVID contributed to that, but the difference is very, very clear. So one way to try and get around that and give you a little bit more autonomy is to have a secondary school project. Essentially, the goal is to write a thesis as you leave high school. And I know in some countries this is done already. In my view, the way to do this is to have a 3-year project. It's a little bit like a mini version of a PhD. So you start in 10th grade. You piggyback on this programming course. You learn other skills, statistics, data analysis, data modeling, scientific writing. And throughout these three years, you develop your thesis. Let's say in 10th grade, you define the topic, and it may be connected to physics or biology or geology or whatever. So it's also a way of connecting your programming course to other topics in your curriculum. So in the 10th grade, you define your project. In the 11th grade, you work on it, you collect data, you do experiments, whatever it takes. And in 12th grade, you write your thesis, your report, and you present it and you defend your secondary school thesis. In principle, you can do this alone. Maybe you do it in pairs with another colleague, but I would strongly advocate that doing it alone is better. You have, of course, a supervisor in your school, but ideally, you would also have a supervisor outside school, in a university, in a research lab, in industry, in some other place. In principle, you could do the project on anything, on any topic, and it's just a matter of finding, through your own contacts or through the school's contacts, a topic that you find challenging and interesting to work on, and to find someone that can act as your external supervisor or advisor. Then there is the issue of what you actually have in the curriculum. Now, one thing that surprises foreign students a lot, and even foreign colleagues of mine when we are in conferences, and sometimes we talk about how prepared students are when they arrive at university. One thing that surprises foreign people is that in Portugal, you only have physics and chemistry as separate subjects in your last year of high school. Before that, you have physics and chemistry as a single subject. So half the year you take physics, half the year you take chemistry. But it's the same teacher giving them both, and so on. Again, I think this is just silly in this day and age. There is also the issue of the curriculum is a little bit out of date. I mentioned this already. Somehow, physics seems to have ended, according to the school curriculum, around 1925 or so, and that's not a good way to prepare you for what you'll encounter in university. Also, the terminology is significantly out of date. I think I gave you a few examples last week. So the curriculum needs an urgent update. That's certainly the case for physics. That's the case also for mathematics. I'm not really qualified to speak about other subjects, but if I talk to other people who teach those subjects or people who work on those subjects, I would argue that it is the case in Portugal that the whole science curriculum in secondary school needs an urgent update. And there's obvious ways to update it. Well, and one example, and one could give others, relates to the science of global warming, right? And that touches physics, chemistry, biology, engineering, etc. So this would be a good way to modernize the curriculum, touching different subjects and so on. Also, Portugal used to have, some years ago when I did high school, a pretty good amount of astrophysics in the physics and chemistry and sometimes biology and geology curriculum. There was never a specific subject on astronomy, but astronomy was there. This has more or less disappeared gradually. There's only a little bit of it surviving in 7th grade. And again, that's just poor judgment. And it's not easy, it's not difficult to see how the curriculum of physics, chemistry, geology could be slightly tweaked to talk exactly about the same physical principles, physical laws, and so on to again include astrophysics content. Then we come to the issue of national exams. Over my lifetime, the structure of national exams in Portugal has changed a few times. Sometimes for the better, I would say, sometimes for the worse. At the moment, as Portuguese students know, you do some national exams in 11th grade, some in 12th grade. I think that's just bad, it's poor judgment. In part, due to the issue of maturity. I think it's just better for you if you do the exam in 12th grade. But the exams are supposed to be cumulative, right? So it doesn't really make sense to do an exam halfway through or 2/3 of the way through your secondary school. So in my view, all exams should be done at the end of 12th grade. And it's actually not difficult to change the system to do that. As people who are or were this year in 12th grade know, we have a lot less hours of classes in 12th grade than in 10th and 11th, right? So a simple solution would be just to compact the same classes in the first and second term, so end the classes at Easter time, and then you have 3 months to study for your exams, do 2 exams, 3 exams, maybe 4 exams, depending on what you're applying to, and defend your thesis. So this would be what you do, let's say, between April and June or July. So it doesn't really give you that much of a workload. It's just a matter of reorganizing things in schools. I would also argue that the exams should be set by university lecturers and researchers. As I mentioned earlier, you're trained in secondary school to do one type of exam which doesn't really reflect what you learn or be asked to demonstrate in exams in university. So I think a lot of people go into university with a very, very wrong idea of what your degree will be. And that's why in competitive courses like physics, some number of students enter in September or October. And by January or February, some fraction of them, 10%, sometimes 20%, you don't see them anymore because they realize the degree is actually something very different and they just can't cope or can do something else. So yeah, this shock that you get as you enter university is something that in most cases, maybe not in all cases, but in most cases could be avoided. Related to that, if you plan to study physics or engineering in university, you really should have physics in 12th grade. Now, part of the bottleneck in Portugal is that physics is perceived as a difficult class in which to get a good grade in 12th grade. So that's why students in 12th grade sometimes take these computing applications or English or some other fluffy course like that. But if you make it compulsory to take physics in 12th grade, if you want to do this at university, then you fix part of that problem. So in Portugal, in order for the school to offer a physics course in 12th grade, there needs to be a minimum number of students asking for that course. And this is sometimes the bottleneck. And student or schools say there's only 5 students asking for physics, so we won't bother to offer a physics course. And therefore, students have to take some other course. But if it's mandatory for you to get into physics or engineering, then schools will adapt. Finally, related to that, I'm a strong advocate of interviewing people for university degrees, especially the more competitive ones. And if you think about it, you understand what the difference is. So in Portugal, there's a numerus clausus, right? And if certain degree has 50 places, the top 50 people who apply to that course with the top 50 grades get in. So in some courses the minimum grade to get in is relatively low. In some courses it's very high. So if the minimum grade is relatively low, so let's say if it's 15 or 16 out of 20. Then national exams and your school grades are probably fine. So maybe a few people will be disadvantaged because some schools are more generous than others in giving grades. But national exams carry some weight. So in principle, the system is going to be relatively fair. Now, if you think of a university degree where the minimum grade to get in is 19.1 out of 20, then this uncertainty is tiny compared to the noise, right? The differences between the way schools give grades is much larger than this. So whether or not you can get into a degree like this might ultimately depend on what school you are. So this is just an unfair system. So the way you control for that is by interviewing people. Okay, you have a numerous clauses, but you look to the ranked list and shortlist 3 times as many people as would be above that threshold, and then you interview all those people and decide based on that. Of course, this takes work. It takes people to interview the students, but it's not impossible to do, but it's just a matter of work. Finally, as a sort of carrot, and also as a way of encouraging and rewarding students' hard work, one could set up a sort of national local program awarding internships to students who have just finished high school and before they get into university. So this would be a kind of summer internship or summer research program. There's several ways you could set up this. You could just look at the national exams results and take the top n number of people and offer them places. Perhaps a more fair way would be to do this within region, or maybe within each municipality or within each school. So let's say the top 3 students in each municipality go into a pool where they can be offered these internships. And then universities, research labs, maybe companies can go into this pool and say which students they prefer for whatever reason. And then each of the students in the pool gets channeled to one of these places. Students could also express their preferences, make a ranked list of places where they want to go, and then these lists are cross-checked and places are awarded. So students would do a little internship, maybe it could be just 2 weeks, it could be 1 month. It would be a good way for the students to get a little glimpse of what university is like before they actually land in university in September or October and have to start working fast. These internships could even be paid if one finds sponsors, but again, my feeling is that a lot of students would be happy to do this, even if these are not paid. Okay, so that's my 5-point plan. Now you might say this is impossible, and when I sometimes talk to people about this or some aspects of this, people say, well, it's a good idea, but it's just too difficult. I want to point out that all these things exist in other countries. All of them. I'm not reinventing the wheel. All these things exist in other countries. And I know of examples of all of them. As far as I know, they don't coexist. There's no place where all 5 exist simultaneously. But they all exist. They've been implemented. They work as far as I can tell. Sometimes when I know about these things, I ask how they work. That's why I asked Hannah specifically about this in the interview. So I just don't buy the argument that they're impossible. They may be difficult to implement. It might take some time, but they're doable. And we know that because they are being done in other places. And in some places, they are being done for a rather long time. And in that sense, I would say, especially, for example, in the case of programming, I think we're probably behind other countries by at least 10 years. And again, I could give specific examples of this. So we are in Portugal quite behind other countries, and obviously the longer we wait into updating the system, the longer will be the cost for your generation and people come after you. So that's it. That's basically what I had to say. I'm trying to the extent of my abilities to implement some of these things. I will tell you a little bit about it on Monday. But for the moment, I'm happy to take questions from you and discuss these things a bit more.